everyone, I am doing a video this time working my way through the Coastline paper pad from kaisercraft. All of the kaisercraft smaller paper pads have 36 papers in them and they generally include 12 specialty papers. So in this one there is gloss. Often they do have foil elements, and there's also 4 die cut pages. So these are super helpful for creating sentiments that you can use that already match in with the pattern papers at the moment. The other thing is it's 6.5 by 6.5, which means if you are following 6 by 6 sketches, you do end up with some extra strips. I have my standard A2 card bases that are 5.5 by 4.25. I've got some blue panels prepped. Often I use grey, but I'm going to use blue because it matches so well with the paper pad. And these are 5.25 by 4, so they just leave a little 1/4 inch border around the edge. I also have a dice, and I'll explain that in a moment. I love using card sketches, and there are so many available that I decided I was going to get organised. I have got Mojo Monday sketches, and there is a Pinterest board that has all 560 of them. I will put a link in the description below. I've printed out sketch 517 through to sketch 560 and mixed them up in here. I have Operation Right Home. I've just printed out 15 pages of 4. So I have 60 sketches in here. This one here with the orange is for the ones that I've used. So I'm going to challenge myself to use random sketches to use up a paper pad. This could go horribly wrong. Okay, and I have a dice because I thought it would be really fun to roll the dice and decide how many I pull out of each package. I'm gonna do Operation Right Home first. And okay, I have to pull out 4 sketches from here. I'm not gonna look, they're all muddled up. They're just gonna be random. I'm gonna try and pull them from the middle. I'll have them face down initially so that I don't know what they look like. And 3 and 4. And then after I create this set of cards, I'll then put the sketches into the done pile and use different ones every time. And you never know, we might find some cool ones that we'd love to use again. Oh, and 4 again. All right, so 8 sketches, and I've got a whole paper pad. So I will have to create, well, I don't have to create some multiple cards, but I will probably create some multiple cards. 1. And there are slim lines in here too, and square cards too. I often do different shapes. So 3. 4. Okay, so I have 8 sketches out of my little Ziplocs. All right, so let's see what we ended up with. Hopefully we've got a really nice mix. Okay, so we've got sketch 172 from Operation Right Home, sketch 182, sketch 188, and sketch 152. From Mojo Monday, we've got sketch 551, we've got sketch 531, sketch 558, and sketch 522. The first sketch that I worked on was Mojo Monday 551. For this sketch, I used the longitude and latitude paper as the background. I really wanted something a little bit darker, so I picked the navy. Then I added a few little extra scraps to the side of the sketch to do the strip that goes behind the oval. I didn't have a lot of strips ready to go, so I thought I'll just use some of the scraps from the pieces I've already chopped up. I also don't have any oval dies, so instead of using an oval, I just chose to use a rectangle instead, and it did give me a very similar look. I've used the swirly striped paper for the backing rectangle, and then I've got some of the shells for the second panel. So this is like 2 little rectangles featured on the front of the card. It's very similar to one of the other designs. I did pull out 2 that were very alike. I've used some small little happy birthday sentiment strips. I already had these in my stash and they fit perfectly just down in the bottom corner. I'm just using my liquid glue to attach the pattern paper as the backing panel, and then for the feature I've actually used some white mats on a couple of the cutter parts. So these little shell cutter parts were bigger initially, and then I chose to chop them down to the same size that was intended for the sketch. I'm putting a little bit of doubled up paper behind just so that there's no noticeable dip on the card, keeps everything nice and level. I'm just running through and doing all 4 of them exactly the same, and I'm just using some scrap cardstock so that nothing goes to waste. I would very rarely use foam tape anymore. I very, very rarely use it. And I seem to be gathering lots of scrap paper, so this is the perfect use for it. So these 4 all look really good, very, very similar in the tones, but slightly different. And I've been able to use these bright blue backing panels to ensure that I don't have too much white space. So I'm now just using my ATG to attach these onto the white card bases, and the white card bases are just the standard A2, so 5.5 by 4.25. The next sketch is Mojo Monday 522. This one also has a 2x3 feature on it, so I used similar cutter parts. I chose to use the seahorse and the foliage, and then for the backing feature paper, I actually used the paper that had the ocean. So it's got a gradient on it that looks absolutely gorgeous, and then I used the 2 pieces of paper for the same design. So on the lighter ocean paper, I'll put the seahorses, and then on the darker one where it wasn't quite as obvious that it was water, I put the foliage. These worked out really, really well. I really like these. They're so simple. I then added a sentiment, which was one of the cutter parts from the paper. I love how kaisercraft has those 4 extra pages in their paper pad that have sentiments and embellishments and other decorations that you can add to your card project. So I've lined everything in white paper, and again I've used my blue backing panels. I'm just attaching all of these onto standard white card bases, and then that's another 4 cards done using one of our random sketches. For Operation Right Home sketch 172, you can see on the back of these focal points that I've got some navy cardstock in a square, and then instead of layering up another 3x3 square, what I've done is I've cut a bit of an L shape that hangs off the edge. It just meant that I didn't have to layer up lots of pattern paper and create lots of bulk, and no one's going to see my paper surgery behind. It all looks nice and normal when you put it onto the blue panel. I've also then done some circle sentiments, which was called for in the sketch, and I've just stamped that in navy blue. I would normally use black for my sentiments, but in this case I thought the navy just matches in a little bit better with the ocean and seaside theme of the paper pad. I actually haven't layered them either. Normally I would put the circle onto a slightly larger circle so that it has a mat, but for this one I've chosen to leave it just plain. I have actually added a little bit of cardstock below it. You can see those little scraps cut out. That just makes it nice and flat, and you see most card makers do this these days. You really don't want a noticeable dip on the card, so I've just chopped out some scrap cardstock. I'm adding some liquid glue to the back of those sentiments and then just popping them straight onto the card. And then that is card set number 3 complete. The next one is Operation Right Home sketch 152. This one is quite an unusual sketch for me. I didn't use a scalloped circle die. I don't think I actually own one, so I just used 2 different sizes of my Hero Arts Infinity circle dies. And then it called for just some squares of pattern paper, and it looks like it's a checkered pattern, but when I really looked at the design, it actually just puts 2 in the corner to offset the circle. So this is definitely not a sketch that I would normally gravitate to, but I do think it created quite a pretty card. I really picked for the circle a focal point that I thought would stand out because there's not too many elements to this card design. You can't see it very clearly, but that foliage paper is actually one of the ones with gloss. So it's actually very shimmery and shiny, so it does stand out in real life. So I'm just attaching these panels onto the card bases, and then I have some of my spare Happy Birthday square sentiments that you'll see me use frequently in my videos. And I'm just going to pop these down in the bottom right hand corner to just offset the circle a little bit. And that means I've now finished sketch number 4. The next one is Mojo Monday 531. This one also has the rectangles and uses some of the cut aparts from the pattern paper. The size of the rectangles is slightly different, and I did hold true to the original card template. And what that means is that the Hessian coloured with the shells is slightly narrower than and taller than the one with the starfish that I'm fussing about with at the moment. And so it does give a slightly different design to the other one that is very similar that I did at the beginning of the video. I'm just adding some extra scraps behind this so that, again, there's no added dip. And I'm using the starfish and I'm using some of the shells. For this, I've also used some of the pattern paper for the banner. I was a bit undecided. I was potentially going to use some navy paper, but I did have some scrap, and this foliage paper is quite an interesting one. So adding this on added a bit more interest to the card. And then it did have a circle sentiment for this one. So I've used the same one that I used on the previous card. And again, I've used the navy ink. So this is a bit of a unique concept for me, picking random sketches and then using them with the paper pad. So I want to know, is this something that you'd like to see more of? Are you inspired by sketches? Do you randomly try new ones, or do you have old favourites that you go back to over and over and over again? If you could drop a comment below, then that would be extremely helpful. The next sketch is Mojo Monday 558. For this one, I actually got out my scoreboard because I was thinking that I might need to line up some paper using the corner of my scoreboard to get it straight. Then I realised that the paper is actually got a 1/4 inch border around the edge, so I didn't end up needing it at all. So that was a tip. If you do need to line something up, then it's super helpful to use your scoreboard, but in this case I didn't need it. So now I'm just adding on some more of this Hessian shell paper for the giant rectangle. And now I'm adding some little bits of paper at the end, and then I've got a navy cardstock. I had a bit of this left over hanging around on my desk, and it matched really well, and it was really quite heavy, which was great. So I used that for the little strip. For the circles, I have used a stitched circle die, and then I've used a happy birthday stamp to add the sentiment. I'm just adding this to all of the cards, and these ones are nice and neutral, and I guess they do have some seashells on them, so they do have the beach theme, the same as the other cards, but these ones were pretty quick to compile. So I have 4 of these ready to go for sketch 558. My 7th sketch is Operation Right Home 188. For this, I've used quite a plain background, and I still matted it on the blue paper. And then this one has a whole series of flags or banners on it. Now, I am not great at cutting banners. They always seem to end up wonky. They never end up balanced. I know that some people do use a square die and line that up to run it through a die machine, or even better, maybe they have some banner dies ready to go. I chose to do a different approach and to actually just make them rectangles instead. So it's still in the spirit of the card sketch, but I just chose to do it a slightly easier way that worked for the supplies that I had on hand. I've then used a sentiment from my stash. This is from the Kaisercraft workshop paper, and that is 4 cards. The final sketch is Operation Right Home 182. This one did have the 5 strips of really small pattern paper, so I did do this one last deliberately. It meant when I had offcuts of other pattern papers, I could choose those designs to chop up and add to the panels. I did mat them onto a white piece. I just find this a lot easier to line things up. And so I'm just adding those now to the back, and then I had some happy birthday sentiments already in my stash, so I matted those on navy, and then I'm going to put those straight on top. They are a different shape to the card sketch, but the intent of having the elements lined up offset to the right was still maintained, so I will constantly change sketches around, make slight adjustments,
I have a really finicky mind when it comes to balance. For these first two, you'll see that I actually put the happy birthday inside the white matted layer with the little rectangles. And then I realized that it was supposed to be offset to the outside. So for the next two, you'll see that I actually did offset it to the outside a little bit closer to the sketch. And I like both.
We've ended up with 32 cards from 8 card sketches, so 4 of each. They are slightly different in some instances, but it was so much fun using brand new card sketches and random card sketches, so I had no idea what to expect. I really had to pay attention to what I was doing and really force myself to get creative. I think that what really helps me is having a backing paper. So this bright blue backing paper layer really makes the cards look complete in my view. So definitely something I recommend if you haven't tried it. Put some videos here that I think you might also enjoy. Have a great day.